Today on Scale Up Radio, I am joined by John Dillon of GJS Dillon, who specialise in commercial property, and primarily that's in the West Midlands area of the UK. And the company was set up in 2010, and they've firmly established themselves as the experts in the commercial property market in the region in a relatively short space of time. And John explains some of the things that they've done to build this reputation. And it's well worth thinking about how you might be able to apply some of his thinking, some of the things that he's done potentially to your business and your industry. John is proud to say that he set the business up during a recession and he survived another one. The company's gone from strength to strength. And one of the key reasons for this has been their clarity and their laser focus on what they do best, which includes being clear about what is outside of that focus. And John's very open about his struggles in scaling up the business and how his approach to leadership has developed and changed over the course of building the business. And during our conversation, we cover a whole range of things such as the importance of really knowing and understanding your market and really getting to grips with it. We talk about the changes in the property market, lots going on at the minute, and the new demands in the post-COVID world, and how their reputation has helped them to lead to 2 mergers. And so join us as we discuss some of the key aspects of scaling up a business, from starting up all the way to a 14-strong market-leading team that GJS Dillon has become today under John's guidance. And John is very open and candid, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to take away from John in this discussion. So let's go across to hear more from John. Welcome to another episode of Scale Up Radio. I'm here with John Dillon of GJS Dillon. So, John, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, Kevin.
My pleasure. Great to have you on. So, GJS Dillon, what's that all about? What do you do?
I started the company on the 1st of September 2010, and it started as a commercial property consultancy. What do I mean by that? Is that we sell, lease, and acquire commercial property. We also manage commercial property, and we also do commercial property valuations. And I've been doing that with a super team for 10 years. And it's only recently that we diversified the business. So on the 1st of September this year, we actually, for the first time, set up a business that actually concentrates on the domestic market. And we actually do residential house surveys. And that's a new area that we are doing going forward.
Okay, so primarily built on the commercial side, but moving forwards then, and partially as a little bit of a result of lockdown, I guess, as well, a little bit of a shift into the residential. So I think you've been quite successful in the region in those 10 years. So are you able to give us a sort of flavour of the size of the business and where you've got to?
We're now up to 14 members of staff, and we have 3 offices in the county. And that commercial business does focus very much on Worcestershire as a county council. So we have our main office in Droitwich. We have satellite offices in Worcester and Bromsgrove. And we focus very much on that market, getting to know local businesses, assisting local businesses, and just being the go-to for commercial property matters.
I have the feeling that it's quite a competitive environment to be in.
It's surprisingly strong, the market at the moment, and we're quite fortunate that we don't have a great deal of competition in the county. It's quite a specialist profession to be in commercial property, so there aren't too many other competitors. And actually, we do need competition. It's really important for us. We share a lot of information with our competitors, which is quite surprising to many people, but we need market information. So when our valuers are valuing, we need to know what the competition have been selling, and likewise. So we do actually share a lot of information between respective surveying firms who specialise in commercial property.
Okay. And what would you say separates GJS Dillon from your competitors, maybe from your peers? What makes you different and stand out?
We decided at day one really to specialise in a local market really and be the local expert. A lot of our competition is regional and have sort of other interests in other areas. We don't. We concentrate on the area. We set up during a recession and felt that a lot of people weren't getting customer service feedback, which is really important. So that's very much built into our sort of ethos that we give customer service and support from day one. And that's something we've tried to do throughout the last 10 years, particularly during COVID, which was difficult for everybody. So that's what separates us, really. It's something that we want to build on as a business going forward, that reputation and that customer service.
So you've been very clear about what you do and don't do. Strong focus and a strong emphasis on that customer service.
Absolutely, Kevin. We saw that actually, if you're not careful, if you try to do too much, you get diluted. So I've seen a lot of companies of a similar size to try and cover, let's say, the West Midlands area, but you dilute your brand. We decided to focus on one area. It's an area that I'd worked in historically, and it was a really good decision at day one to focus and say, right, we're not going into Birmingham, we're not going to go down to Cheltenham, we're going to focus on our special. And it's paid dividends because we now produce a report that covers every region within the county, which we're proud to say is used by county council, and a lot of local authorities use our report because they know that we're the local experts. So it's paid dividends really from day one.
And let's explore that report for a minute, because it's something that it's a thought leadership piece for you, essentially. So do you mind just describing a little bit for people listening that don't know that report, what that report is?
It comes out annually, and we effectively take all the data from all the commercial firms that work in the region, developers, investors, and we compile it into a totally independent report. And we really look at trends in the market, so we can compare year on year what's happening in, let's say, okay, Bromsgrove, what happened last year? What happened 5 years ago? What happened 10 years ago? Have we got the right stock levels? What do we need more of? What do we need less of? And we'll do that for each of the regions throughout Worcestershire to make sure that we can look at each region and say, has this been a good year? And we're trying to sort of tailor it towards developers, investors, say, we need more industrial accommodation in Malvern. We need more office accommodation in Worcester. And it's started to be used by, as I say, a lot of public sector bodies who see it as an independent piece of work, so they can use the data and use it in the correct way.
And was that something that you did right from the start, or did that come later on somewhere over those 10 years?
We did start doing it probably from year 2 onwards, but we actually used the data ourselves. And it wasn't until probably 5 or 6 years into the business, we thought, you know what, we need to share this data. And that was quite a sort of debate amongst the team. We've done all this work. Why are we giving it to essentially our competitors can use it? And we thought, no, we ought to do this. It defines us then as the independent firm who provides this information. And again, we're glad we did it. Again, it's really helped us to grow the business going forward.
In what sort of tangible ways do you think it has helped? Because I know there'll be people that will be going through those same questions that you were thinking about was yes, should we do this? And because it's quite a lot of time and effort. I know, I'm sure it costs you quite a lot as well to do, from internal resource time as well as probably financially to put, because it's a very nice, professionally produced report as well, isn't it? So, what tangible benefits do you think you've derived from it?
I found myself constantly in meetings and seminars explaining to people, what's the commercial property market like? And I was always saying it's really strong. This is what's happening. That's happening. And you got the impression that the audience would always feel, well, you're going to say that, John. That's your profession. You're going to big it up, aren't you? And it's not until I could back it up with numbers that I could actually illustrate, look, it's not my opinion. The numbers speak for themselves. So it helps, I suppose, in terms of credibility. We were able to demonstrate the numbers. And so, look, the numbers don't lie here. You can see the trends, and we use this information not just in terms of when we're telling people we need new accommodation, but to demonstrate to our clients, look, why should you market your office building now? Because these are the prices that you're going to get. And look, this is the data. You can see that this is a great time to do it, or conversely, this isn't a good time to do it. So it really allowed us, again, to give a sort of element of expertise to our new clients and customers to say, gosh, you're not just giving us a sort of wishy-washy opinion, you're giving us hard facts, which helps us actually win more work.
Excellent. And I'm feeling that I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, with everything going on with the pandemic and everything, what do you think that the trends are going to be moving forwards then in terms of commercial, particularly in terms of commercial space? I
think the trend has already shifted, and it was shifting even before COVID towards warehousing, industrial units. We're not selling stuff on the high street anymore. We're selling it on the internet. And the demand has gone through the roof for warehouse space, not only in the county, but nationally. And I think that trend will continue. So we just get, crazy inquiries every week, which we cannot satisfy. We're just looking at that whole debate with the county council, because some would argue that actually, if you're going to bring in lots of warehousing in, does it create the right sort of jobs for the county? So it creates another debate. But I think that's the big pressing element of our, I suppose, commercial world that's going to get interesting going forward.
So focus on the warehouse and distribution side of things, and what about commercial office space? What do you think the trends will be there? Because certainly within our clients, we get some that are saying, you know what, I've got so used to working completely remotely, we're going to do that now. Others are saying, well, we just still want some office space, but maybe not quite as much as we want. And then others, so what's your take on how that's going to go?
This was really, again, our annual report was vital here, because we analysed the figures during COVID, and everybody would expect that office market is flat. Who's going to take office space during a lockdown when people are at home? But they did, Kevin. It's quite amazing. The market was actually quite strong, not for people expanding, but for people contracting. So people saying, look, I'm in 10,000 square foot at the moment. I've got 80 people, but do you know what? I think they're going to start coming in the office, but also working at home. I need half the space. So the market was really strong for people downsizing. So there's lots of activity. And that, again, was demonstrated within our report, which we demonstrated when we did it in March. And again, we'll demonstrate when the figures come out this year. I think it's been quite a strong year for offices, but in a different way. And people are using office space differently. The one national trend that you can pick up on now is the need for regional office hubs. And I think now, I often say this, the genie is out of the bottle, that, do people want to trek into city centres now and do that hour and a half commute? I suspect not. And I suspect those people would probably say, well, okay, I like working from home, but I also need somewhere to go and meet my colleagues. So why not? How about a regional office hub that isn't in a city centre? And I keep saying, Worcestershire's fantastically placed. We're in the middle of the country. We've got fantastic links from a motorway point of view, but we've also got a Parkway station, etc. So, we're really in a great position to sort of jump up on that. So that, I think, is a trend going forward, which you can read nationally, and certainly it affects us in the region. Okay, so you hinted at your experience before you set up 10 years ago. So let's go back to 2010. What made you start up in the first place, John? I was very fortunate. I started my career in Worcester. So that was my first appointment, and I ran a department there for 6 or 7 years, and I really enjoyed it. I was a 24-year-old, and I was very lucky to run a department of 5 or 6 surveyors. And I suppose, like any 24-year-old, I made some great errors, learnt a lot. I then moved up to after 7 years in Worcester, I moved up to one of the national surveying practices in Birmingham, and I worked with them for 10 years. And it was really good to see how the big boys did it. But with both of those experiences, I thought, gosh, we could do it so much better. And so that was really the drive for it, to say, look, I learned a lot from both of those, the small practice, the big national. And actually I thought, with a little bit of focus, you can be so much better. And that's really what drove me to do it in 2010. And really my motto was to have no regrets and to do it. And I didn't want to get to the end of my career and say, well, I just wasn't brave enough to do it myself, really. Take us back, if you would, to the start. Then, what was that like? Did you start with a book of customers, or did you start with a complete blank piece of paper? How was that? What was that like, if you remember? I was really lucky that when I started, I was able to go back to a lot of my Worcestershire contacts who were superb. So they know who they are, and they were brilliant from day one. I said, look, I've been up in Birmingham. I've come back, said to my business, would you support me? And I had just a great deal of luck, really, Kevin. A lot of people said, yeah, we remember you, John. Of course you can. So I was very lucky in that first year that I picked up a lot of business. It was during a recession. So I suppose I was the sort of new boy that had come back, really full of energy. buzzing, where my competition was probably a little bit sort of deflated after a recession, and I was able to pick up quite a lot of work. And I was very fortunate. I had a superb ex-team member that came to join me called Lynn Davis, who was superb. And the two of us sat down and said, okay, my focus is new business and clients. Her focus was office systems. And again, she'd worked with so many other surveying firms, and she said, great, we can just start with a clean slate, John, and we can just get our systems and processes from day one. And we're still using those now.
Great. That's interesting. So two very clear about your skill sets and where they're separate, but I'm sure there's a bit of overlap, but very, very clear about that. And systems from day one, that's interesting, because I don't suppose everybody thinks about starting a business and having systems from day one.
They were super, and they were really, I call them basic administration stuff, but my colleague was just superb at doing that side. And I think that was I debated for a long time, was this business going to be John Dillon, or was it going to be John Dillon and one other? And I'm so pleased I went for that other, because you mentioned there, I'm a big believer in stick to what you know. Do not get distracted. I'm no typist. I'm no putting together fantastic brochures and correspondence. And this is all the stuff that was Lynn's skill set, and she did it superbly. Freed my time to do what I'm a chartered surveyor. I've got to get out. I've got to win business, and I've got to convince people that we've got a business. I think had I not gone through for that assistance from day one, I doubt whether the business would have survived much beyond its 12 or 18 months first period.
Very good. And I know we were talking just briefly before I pressed record, and you were talking about Michael Gerber and the EMyth and the transition from being a technician. So, did you want to expand on that a little bit, maybe in those early days? That was my biggest learning curve, really. And it's stuff that I just sort of set up this business and assumed that, a successful business was all about me doing my day job. I'd been that technician. I'd been a chartered surveyor for 20 years, and I thought that's what you did. And you got other like-minded chartered surveyors to come and join you, and merrily you all moved forward. And that I suppose, EMyth and Myth sort of came to an end for me really at about year 5, where I got some really good business coaching and realized that I'd suddenly stepped into a new arena. I'm now a business owner, and I didn't know how to be a business owner. I had to sort of get the textbooks out and learn to run and manage a business. And the hardest part for me, Kevin, was not doing, but delegating. I'd done it so often for myself, and I thought, but as that business coach said, how are you ever going to expand this business? You're already working 10-hour days, 5 days a week. There isn't any more time to do that. So it was a super time for me. And ever since then, every day of my journey in GJS Dillon is to say, I need to be out of this business and delegating and making sure I can see where this business is going, not with my head down, necessarily doing all the work. So that was at the sort of 5-year point. Sounds like then you'd got yourself very busy, got a good group of customers, but you were working in the business a lot at that point. So can you just, before we get into, because I'd love to ask you about the delegation side and how you managed to do that, because I think there'd be a lot of people that are wondering how do I delegate? So we'll come back to that. But in those first 5 years, then what did the business look like then when you got through to that sort of point? Well, I was quite fortunate. At the end of 2 years, I got approached by a very successful practice in Worcester called Guys Jones Sawyer, and a lovely gentleman called Philip Jones, who actually said, look, I would really like to merge my business with you with a view to retiring. So we came together in 2012, and that gave me a Bromsgrove and a Worcester office. And it also introduced me to an area of surveying that I'd not been involved with, which was the management of commercial property. Philip and I came together and we got on like a house on fire. He was a total gent and a pleasure to work with. So that was, I suppose, what you'd class as a lucky break. I then had a phone call 12 months later from another superb chartered surveyor called Bill Fellows, who had a practice in Stourport. And Bill said, look, I like what you've done with Philip. I'd love to come and merge my practice with GJS Dillon. So he came on board and introduced actually a whole
another raft of professional services, rent reviews, lease renewals, valuations of both commercial and domestic property. So that really allowed me to move the business in those first 5 years without necessarily realizing that I needed to step out the business and manage it. And it's only when those two surveyors fully retired that I found myself back by myself with quite a big team that I thought something's got to change here, because I've got to manage this team. And that's the point that I turned for business coaching and loved every minute of it.
So when you merged with them and they brought on all of these extra services that you were doing, you weren't the expert in those services. So you were naturally able to distance yourself a little bit from it. But when they retired, that sucked you back in.
Correct. They pretty much took sort of those elements on board. And when they retired, it was back to me really and I thought, look, I can't continue to do my day job. I've got to get somebody in to manage it. And effectively, we set up 4 departments at year 5. And that was structure and saying, okay, this company needs a structure. And it was that moment of reading and my business coach saying to me, managing director isn't something you put on a business card. It's something that you actually do. And I can remember putting my hands up and saying, I don't know what that means, to show me. And I started the whole journey of reading, which I loved, and researching, going out there and reading things like the EMyth and actually, waking my wife up at night saying, oh my God, that's me. I've been doing that. And realizing that had I done it the wrong way? Yes, but I probably had to go through that journey and understand that's exactly what I'd been doing. But it was like a epiphany for me. I just thought, right, I can see what I've got to do now. And every minute since then has been back to, come on, a successful business is one that operates without you. You've got to delegate. You've got to trust your deputies, managers. And I've got a super team around me. I'm very lucky, but I've got to empower them. I can't scale this business up myself. I would just be burnt out.
Yeah. And how many people were when you set up those four divisions with that structure at that point? How many people were in the business then?
I think we've got a head count of about 7 or 8. And it was really, we'd got some really good people and they really had come from those mergers. We got some additional people in. So we'd started recruiting there. So we got a really good, competent team. But as we started taking on more and more business, we needed, experienced chartered surveyors. So that's really the bit that I felt I needed to focus on, to go and find those people. So we started actively recruiting for a really experienced asset manager. And we're lucky that we found a super guy called Adam Jones who came into the business. And again, I needed to find somebody to do my job, Kevin. I used to run that, what we call the agency team, the sales, the letting, the acquisitions. We found a super chap called Andrew Lewis who came into the business. So again, senior appointments that we could delegate to and really, give them the support they need from a managing director rather than interference. And that's the bit that I've tried to do, I suppose, since that time that we did business coaching.
And what gave you the confidence that there was going to be the business coming in to support those reasonably senior hires that you made? Because
we couldn't cope with the business prior to those senior appointments. We were, I wouldn't say actively pushing business away, but we were having to say to clients, look, we don't have that capability. I'm not yet. I'm sorry. I can remember some super management jobs that we were offered. And I think you've got to come clean with clients. You can't bluff. And these were major instructions for us. And I just had to go back to those clients and say, look, we don't have those resources yet. Will you bear with us? And those people, I think, appreciated it. And those clients are now clients now. So my advice would be don't bluff, but just say, look, if you bear with me, I can get those resources in. But the moment we don't. And I think the danger is if you take too much on, people talk very quickly. So you ruin your reputation. So people go and say, look, we gave GJS Dillon a chance and they were rubbish. You can't ever unpick that. So just be honest. And, we sat down I can remember it in 5 years and saying, look, what work do we want? What are we going to specialize in? And what work do we not specialize in? We're not going to go and do petrol stations, laundrettes. This is specialist stuff. We don't do licensed premises. This is specialist stuff. Give it to the specialist. Concentrate on what we do. We want to be known as office and industrial specialists. And one area that we haven't been to date is experts on retail property. And people ask us, why not? Come on, you're a commercial property. Isn't that what you do? And I saw that when I worked for the Nationals. To be a retail expert, you need to be in London speaking to those national retailers. Otherwise, you're guessing all the time. So again, we decided that, that high street retail was not us. But if somebody calls and say, look, I've got a shop in the high street, I'd like to let it, we'll turn around and say, it's not for us, but these are the people you need to speak. These are the experts you need to speak to. And people really appreciated that. We got more work off it by not bluffing and saying, it's not us. Thank you so much, John. At least you've been honest. And it actually paid dividends. We concentrated on what we were good at and didn't try to bluff.
Great advice. And that's so difficult to do, isn't it? Especially in the early stages when we know we need the money coming in, essentially.
Yeah, you do. And that first year, you just think, oh, it's a job. The phone's ringing. And, I suppose that year I tried to be all things to all men. You do. You want to make sure the business is successful. It's only really when I got to year 2 that I could start being a bit selective, deciding what we want. And Philip Jones really helped me with that. He'd been in business a long time and said, look, you need to be very clear on what you are going to do and not going to do. So that was a really good lesson for me at the end of year 2.
And you mentioned, actually going back to Philip Jones, you mentioned also that the commercial management was vital, or it was a key part going through. Can you just take us through that a little bit as to why that was so important?
For me, the holy grail is reoccurring income. So if I've got management, it's going to take me through, it's well recorded that commercial property is going to have peaks and troughs. And the problem that I had in year 1 and 2, that I was susceptible to recessions, peaks and troughs, I was selling and letting commercial property. And if the market's up, great. But if it's down, I'm going to struggle. So actually having management income, giving me that reoccurring income was vital. And it's the bit that we are most keen to grow. And it's the bit that was introduced to us at year 2. And we've really nurtured that team and department because it's so important to give. And it allows us to have contact with clients, not every 5 years when a tenant comes out, but every week, and say, come on, have you thought about planned maintenance on your building? We'll do that for you, and we'll look after your rent reviews, and we'll take care of your valuations. And that's a service that a lot of Worcestershire landlords love, that they've got a little bit disillusioned with the national surveying practices who've done it historically because they feel like they're a number. Whereas with GJS Dillon, we give them personal service. They know that there's a problem. I'll see them within a couple of hours and we sort it quickly. So that's been a really important growth area in our business.
And that's, some more great advice. And people often underestimate the value of reoccurring revenue. It's easy to just say, well, yes, I get it. It's a regular subscription or a regular payment or something like that. But you've just described actually some of the other spin-off benefits that you get from that, including things like they're almost certainly going to come back to you for the ad hoc pieces of work as well, because they've got that relationship that's building up. You've got that chance to really build that relationship up on an ongoing basis. So there's lots and lots of advantages just beyond the basic, yes, it's a regular paycheck.
Absolutely. And we worked out that quite quickly at the end of year 2 that, we have that regular contact. It's really important. And, we're not going to sell services that people don't need, but, it's surprising that those landlords do need the different services. And, bizarrely, we've gone to those existing property management clients and said, look, we're now doing a domestic service. Oh, great. I'm looking to move in the autumn, so I'll get you to do the survey. So actually it's gone hand in glove with that as well. So it's nice, again, to be able to offer a whole range of services to clients and keep that regular contact. And
it's interesting as well, because many businesses might say, well, I want recurring revenue. I want, what can I do on that? And of course, there's generally lots of things. But unless you've got a very strong focus and a very strong reputation in whatever field it is, then trying to get somebody to say, well, pay me a regular amount for this is much harder, isn't it? If you were just general property agents, it would be harder to come up with a recurring revenue model like that. Whereas when you've got that trust and credibility already built up, it makes it that much easier, doesn't it? Absolutely. You've got to be patient. And I always knew this. And really, my job for the first 2 years is to do my job, which is to get those boards out there and get a reputation. Without it, you can't go and say to somebody, can we manage you? They don't know who you are. So my job was all about
And one of the big luxuries that I invested in at day one was I actually employed a PR agency to help me. And that was, again, a super way of really establishing the brand, getting people to know who we are. We joke, actually, Philip Jones rang me up 2 years into the business and was staggered to hear that there were only 2 of us in the business. He thought there were 10 of us. And he said, your PR is everywhere. You look like you're dominating this market. You're joking, are you? There's 2 of you. And I said, there's only 2 of us. And I think it was one of the reasons that he was so impressed to bring his business. But then once you've got a business like Guys Jones Sawyer, now Guys Jones Sawyer have been around in Worcester for 30 years. So people often ask me, what's the GJS in GGS Dillon? Guys Jones Sawyer. And really, a lot of those clients know that they've been with that firm and us, we're just the new generation, for some of them 20 years plus. So we effectively were able to get a credible history through merger, but able to say, come on, we're going to move that in a new direction. And those clients are like, so, we haven't lost any of those original Guys Jones Sawyer clients, which we're really proud of.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. So let me come back to that delegation question then. So it is a challenge for all of us. So how have you managed to make that work, both in your own mind, but then also practically? And how's that changed? How's delegation changed for you from the earlier days to now, perhaps? How's delegation work for you?
Delegation is, I did things really wrong, really. I thought leadership was all about me sort of, there's a problem in the team, I jump in, lovely for John's ego that he can go and explain the finer points of the 1954 Landlord and Tenant Act. And he's a really, knowledgeable surveyor. But I really realised that my team wouldn't then problem solve. If we've got a problem, let's just go and see John. And I realised that that's not how you empower teams. So really, I did it the other way. And when we've got problems that we want to sort of deal with, I try to allocate a time each week for each department head to come and see me. And it's amazing that what we do now is to say, John, I need some help with this. And I'll say, okay, well, shall we pick it up next week in our meeting? When we get to the meeting, guess what? They've problem solved already. So I have that regular slot with you. And I realized that actually by me problem solving for me, it just shows the team that I don't trust them. And actually, I do trust them. So it was a total mindset change for me to say, look, I trust you. You go and do it. You go and have a first go at it, and we'll pick it up in our regular meetings. And that's what changed for me, that we started having regular meetings like clockwork to pick these things up and not doing what I thought was a good manager, which is, John, have you got a minute? Yeah, of course I can. Come on in. And, and that took so much of my time. And I don't think it helped with the delegation thing. So that was sort of, I won't say lesson 1, but it was one of those early lessons about, good delegation, which is trust your team and just give them time to support them. And that's what we implemented into the business at that time.
Now, yeah, some great things in there, and that business rhythm essentially in there as well. So having the weekly session, which you're clear about what can be done in that, but as you say, that gives you, instead of having the discussion around the coffee machine or whatever, it allows you to defer it to the right point with lots of advantages, including, as you've said, they've probably solved it themselves by then. Excellent. So as you then moved into delegating more and more, how have you managed to keep control of the business? And we talk about delegation, not abdication, don't we? So, how have you managed to make sure from that side of it that you've kept control over it?
One of the big lessons that I sort of learned very early on is know your numbers. Just make sure you're on top of those numbers. And as I started to delegate more, I had to define, okay, what's my job as a managing director? What am I here to do? And I felt that really I need to keep an eye on those numbers, make sure that I knew those figures and weren't guessing, and so made sure systems and processes came in there. But it also freed my time up to start thinking, where are we going? What does this business look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And it was, I have to say, a really difficult stage for me as a chartered surveyor, having been trained. There was a lot of guilt that I went through. Guilt that I should have been doing surveying work, and I should be out helping the team and putting lots of fees into the pot, when really what I was reading at the time said, no, that's not your job. If you don't do it, nobody will do it. So you need to get out there, stop being a fee earner, which was a big sort of stage in I thought, gosh, the business will never survive without me not earning fees. But it allowed me to look at expansion. Where do we need to go? What have we got to do? What systems have we got to get in place? What am I good at? I'm not fantastic on figures. Right, we'll get somebody who's brilliant on figures who's sitting next to you. And I did that. All the stuff that I thought, okay, these are the bits that I can do, but this is the bit I need help with. And I went out to the business network and said, can people recommend people? And that was really, I think, beneficial for me, but very beneficial for the business.
So, and yes, that's one of the things, isn't it? It's hard enough at the early days to delegate anything, but what you were very good at was identifying the things where your strengths are and where they're not, and delegating the things that actually you shouldn't be doing because you can add more value elsewhere. What you've just described now is the next step from that, which is then delegating the things that actually you are good at, but that without you finding somebody else who can take that off of you hit a ceiling. It's
a really difficult phase, but I totally knew it was the right thing to do. And it's very difficult when the perfect job lands in your desk and you think, I could do this with my eyes closed. This is fantastic, but no, I'm going to pick it up, take it downstairs and give it to this team and say, over to you. And it's the only way that you can scale up a business and really move forward. And that's the bit that I found difficult at first, but now I realize that's my job. And if I keep that job, the team say, well, John doesn't trust us. He feels that, we're not capable. And okay, they might not have had quite the experience I've got, but they're never going to learn if I don't give them those opportunities. And I'm always there. I'm always there to support. But I think the biggest thing that I was amazed about is I just assumed that clients would want me. Perhaps that was my ego. I thought, gosh, clients are going to want John Dillon. They're going to feel shortchanged if I give this job to a very able deputy. But they haven't been, without exception. They know that if there's a problem, they can call me. They know I've got my finger on the pulse and I speak to that surveyor every week. We have an hour meeting with that fair. I know what's going on. I guide them. And so far to date, that transition has gone really well where, even those early clients who gave me work 10 years ago are now dealing with the next generation, but they know that I'm here and they haven't sort of taken their business elsewhere, snubbed that, gosh, John's not giving us day-to-day contact. But, I'm always going to have a call with them, once a month, which works really well.
Good. Yes, that certainly is a difficult transition to make. And you can get caught in something called the owner's trap, really, which is where you basically get a self-fulfilling circle, really, because they all want to come back to you because you haven't delegated it properly and whatever. And it sounds like you managed to break that really, really well. So fantastic. So how do you think your leadership is something that often rears its head with people we're working with? So how do you think your leadership style then has evolved from when you start over the 10 years that you've been running, 11 nearly now that you've been running the business?
I've made mistakes like any leader, and it's just sort of not being too harsh on yourself. You're going to make mistakes. It's just learning from it. I try to be as inclusive as I can with the team, and I try to sort of say, look, this is a business that we're all involved with. So that's something that I've tried to develop in the team as we've gone from sort of 3 of us up to 14 of us. So we have really almost day one had a situation where we sit down every Tuesday lunchtime, sit around the table and talk about what's going on in the business to make sure that we don't go into silos. And it's been a really good way of keeping the team together. So, yeah, I think any sort of leadership style develops and mine's developed out of errors that I've made, but learning from it, a lot of coaching, a lot of reading. And I really like that aspect of running a business to look at the multitude of leadership books out there, which are fantastic. So I've really got into those as the business has developed.
If we were to have this conversation in 5 years' time, John, what would you say has to have happened professionally and maybe personally as well in those 5 years for you to think, you know what, they were a good, successful 5 years?
Again, I want to make sure that I'm growing the departments, that we're growing and opening new departments, which is lovely that we've started with a totally new company doing the residential service. So that's great. I really want to sort of grow the company Not to the point where we're empire building, but it's just totally sustainable. Some departments are really got strength in depth. Others need more strength in depth. And we know that. We're going to work really hard on those. I want to extract myself from the day-to-day surveying even more. When we're short on numbers, which happens, COVID, illnesses, etc., I find myself sucked back into business, and I'm back, being the technician, which is fine, but I don't see any need for that going forward. So again, I need strength in depth. I think, like everybody, I need to recruit really wisely, and I need to make GJS Dillon a place that's so attractive for new talent, and that's the bit I'm really working on. So, giving people, flexibility, ability to work from home, illustrating that we're not interested in managing people, that we're given that anybody coming in has a say in the business. And I really want to make it an attractive place. And I think if I can attract the right talent, to answer your question, in 5 years, that's how the company will look successful in 5 years. Right talent, retention of staff, and again, just opening up sort of new areas in our world, really, which we look at all the time.
And a couple of questions that I'd like to ask everybody, and I think you've hinted a little bit, but generating a consistent stream of on-profile, high-quality leads is always a challenge. I say always, but certainly in the early days, but going forward too. So, what have been the key things that you think have given you that regular business coming in that's worked for you? What's worked for you?
I've allocated a lot of my time in the business to go and help different charities, companies. I sat as a school governor, which was immensely helpful. And I now sit on things like the board of the Worcestershire LEP. None of this is stuff that I charge for, but it's time that has been fascinating for me. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, but actually it's allowed me to sort of be part of the business community. And by going onto those committees, charities, different boards, it's given me access to clients without me necessarily having to look for them. Being part of that network, you become a sort of, you've got a problem with commercial property, just speak to John, he'll help you. And I picked up a lot of work through those channels. So that's a really, I would say, anybody, setting up a business, that it's difficult because that business is going to need your time, but you need to allocate a bit of time to give to other people. So the giving bit, and people realize that you're giving, you're not in it for me. We're all in it together. And I'm really, that's been a core value of GJS Dillon from day one, that we want to give people time and help people, not necessarily for our own ends, really. And that's the bit that has put me in good stead. And only today, we picked up a job because of my involvement with the Worcestershire LEP. Somebody said, you've been recommended. Lovely, that's great. So these sort of organisations I've found to be really helpful.
You mentioned right at the beginning with Lynn, I think you're saying with the systems and processes. How have you managed to make sure that as the business has evolved, that those processes stay up to date?
We used to, once those initial systems had sort of been developed, we sort of didn't work very much on them. And once we got really to a situation that we'd gone from probably 8 to 14, we discovered that those systems just weren't relevant. So we blocked out the diary. And we actually, each department said, okay, we're going to work on our systems, not as and when, but we're going to do an hour a week, every week. And at first I think there was a look of total, you're crazy, but we went back to, basics, and there was I think there's a lovely me talk that is called How to Make Toast. And we use that as a start of processes. So anybody who's thinking, how do I start processes? My recommendation is just Google how to make toast. It's literally a TED talk, and it's literally 10 minutes long. It's brilliant. So we get everybody to go back to basics. Come on, what's the process here? What do we do? And we were doing this process, but we didn't realize we had a process. And, we kept on saying, okay, we keep on saying that we're fabulous at customer service. What are we doing differently that other people aren't doing? We work on it every week. So every department has to allocate an hour a week for processes. And that's the bit that's, I think, set us apart from competition, that processes, systems, And did it help us in COVID? Because we were able to, we talked about what happens if she's not there, he's not there. And we just went into system processes mode, and it got us through brilliantly. We always can be better. We're not complacent. We keep doing systems and processes, and those newcomers come in, we tell them about Toast and they look at us as if we're sort of crazy, but a really good, simple way of, I think, just getting a process into a business.
And where are those processes kept? How do people access them?
We have a little, in each department, we actually have a physical copy of the processes. So a new starter can walk in, doesn't have to have 4 hours of instruction. They'll have induction, of course. We'll tell them all about the company, but effectively got the how-to guide for agency. Go and have a look at it. And, the agency one is just superb. It's a little pamphlet, and it says there are 10 stages involved with selling or letting a commercial property. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and you do this, you do this, you do this. So you can follow the process. So it's really good for new starters. And that's just one example. We have slightly more complicated ones, obviously, for the survey teams, but a similar process that there's hard copy manual that anybody can refer to at time. We've got them on the computer systems, but we like that sort of, we call it the sort of, almost like sort of Operation 2.0. That's what we use as the systems and processes guide for each team.
And they're reprinted when something changes, are they?
They change.
Yeah.
I'd like to say weekly. The team would probably giggle and say probably it's every couple of months they change. But we've got new people coming in at the moment, just recruited. And, Kevin, it's great because we just want to hear an outsider's view.
Yeah.
What do you... Oh, well, to me, the outsider, as the novice, this doesn't make any sense at all. Well, how would you do it, Kyle? Well, I do it this way. Great. Good. Let's build on that system. Don't get complacent, because if we do, we're going to lose our cutting edge. And we've always had that cutting edge, which has put us in good stead, really.
As I just one or two questions, just to wrap it up, really. You mentioned books. You obviously read a lot. So have you got a top 3 list, maybe, of books you'd recommend that people read?
Absolutely. I love the EMyth, which is superb. The other one is, I'm going to get the title wrong, but Simon Sinek, and it is Leaders Eat Last, which I thought was a super book. The other one was, I think, the Chimp Paradox, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So again, those would be my 3 go-to books for, learning to, and that's what it's been, just learning. And, anybody listening, don't beat yourself up. How would you know how to run and manage a business? You wouldn't. You've been a techie for most of your life. And I thought, okay, just become the sponge. Just shut up, listen, and go to people who can help you. And that, we're so lucky, Kevin, you support businesses brilliantly, can come to you, but lots of sources out there of people can help you. And if you don't know this, just rein your ego in and say, how would you know it? Go and learn. You'll love the process. It's the best part of running a business. It's been magical. Don't get me wrong. I love being a surveyor. It's great, but those are the new challenges for my team to develop. Yeah. My challenge is to be that business owner, and I'm not there yet. I think I'm about a quarter of the way through my journey. I've got so much more to learn. It pains me when I go and see new companies, and that startup company individuals say, gosh, John, aren't I being clever? I've done my own websites, I've written my own contracts, I've gone and done this, and I just think, why? You're not qualified to do this. Get people who do and concentrate what you're good at. Otherwise, it's a false economy. I'm doing all my own accounts. Why? Are you an accountant? Get a good accountant. And that's the bit that I see on my travels when I go and see commercial property owners. The first question I ask now is, tell me about your business. And it's fascinating. And
that might be the answer to this question. But if you were to, but I know you already did this, but if you were to go back to 2010, what advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know now, that you might do differently? So I had doubts as to whether it was me or one other, and it was well done. That was good. Without that one other, you're kidding yourself. You mentioned it. Be honest with yourself. Where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses? And don't try to bluff. If you're not good at something, get somebody to help you. So that was really the bit that I
got right, but I could have got so wrong. I could have thought, no, that's a cost I could do without. I'll try and do it myself. I wouldn't have got out the starting blocks. So I think that's really good. I think the thing that I probably would have liked a little sooner is, probably at the end of year one or even sooner, getting business support, a business coach like you, Kevin, to give me some structure. And also, where are you going? Why are you doing this? What's the end result? Because I see so many businesses and you think, well, sorry, guys, what's your exit here? What are you trying to do? What's the purpose? I knew why I wanted to set it up, because I could do so much better than the competition and I felt we could really be good. But somebody said to me, what's your exit? And Kevin, I was a bit offended by this, because I think at that time I was 44. What do you mean my exit? I've only just started. No, John, what's your exit? You need to think about that now. And you think, I haven't even given that 10 seconds thought. I'm just making it up as I go along. And that was the truth of it. And actually it was, right, come on, sit down with my wife and say, what do we need as a family? Is John going to be working till he's 70? Do people buy businesses, or might you get your, as we have said, no, actually, John's exit is that really the next generation will buy me out. And that's my plan. And I didn't have a plan, but that was it after year 5. Come on, guys. And once those guys have got skin in the game, different ballpark, when it's their business, not John's business. So these are all things that I probably would have introduced a little bit sooner, but then the other half of me thinks, no, I needed to learn that lesson. I needed to realize that I can't do any more. And once you get to that realization, I was a bit more sponge-like, I suppose.
I think that's very true. It's all, yes, we have to learn some of these things ourselves, don't we? We can't just magically suddenly get it all right from the start. Brilliant. It's been fascinating talking to you, John. Really, really enjoyed it, and I know there's lots of great advice in there for people listening. So really, really appreciate your time. Thank you. If people would like to get hold of you or GJS Dillon, what's the best way for them to do that?
Please feel free to contact me. My contact details are on our website, ggsdillon.co.uk. I can be contacted at any time, and always happy to spend time with new businesses or people thinking of starting businesses. It's something that really interests me, and I'm happy to give people guidance. It's funny that over the years, I've been asked to come and speak to startup businesses about commercial property. And I've actually pushed away from that, because the last thing you want to think about when you're starting a business is to take on a big commercial property. You want the cheapest place that you can operate. And I realize that. So, commercial property becomes, I think, a sort of prerequisite of that business. Probably once you're 2 years in, you can start thinking about, right, scale up. I need somewhere to do that. But I can advise those startup businesses of, you need flexibility, you need to watch your costs, and I can guide people on some fantastic serviced offices out there, and flexibility. Don't go and sign a 5-year lease. That's the last thing you want to do. You need to just give yourself flexibility, just because the business will change. Mine did. What I started at day 1 didn't look very similar to what it looked like at the end of year 2. So have that flexibility. And that's the bit. You don't need to be buying a massive commercial property, and you need all that capital for your business. And that was the stuff that I felt was important for those startups. But once you get to year 2 and 3, now you need to be thinking about, right, come on, why are you renting? Different ways we can help you buy commercial property, and some lovely tax breaks for the business, which, I'm happy to sit down with a business owner and just discuss and say, look, there's some good ways of actually owning commercial property, which works for you personally and works for the business as well.
Brilliant. Super. John, thank you very much indeed for taking part in Scale Up Radio today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Don't forget to take a look at www.bizsmart.co.uk to access a great range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey. So that's bizsmart.co.uk, which is bizsmarts.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.